Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Riverfront. This is episode number I've lost count of the world's most dangerous podcast, where we discuss the Cincinnati Reds and occasionally Denny Nagel. Denny Nagel was a guest on Red Leg Roundtable this week, Jeff. It was a very good interview.
Nice. I have to go back and check that out. I didn't get a chance to see that. I always liked watching Denny Nagel pitch.
Yeah, he was really good, right? I'm your host tonight, Tim Daniel. Joining me is Jeff Carr from Locked On Reds, hopefully your friend and mine. And I'm very, very grateful that Jeff took some time to spend time with me tonight and talk some Reds baseball because I was way too busy with all my other things in life. I was like, oh yeah, I still have to do a show this week. And so I texted Jeff real quick. He not only was willing to come hang out with me, but went to the Cyclones game and decided to still stay up for a little bit and talk with me tonight. So I am very grateful, as always, to spend time with you, Jeff, as you know. So thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Glad to be a part of the show. Pups and puck nights at the Cyclones game. They lost 2-1, but it was a fun night taking the pup down to the good old hockey game.
Yeah, I don't think I could take my dogs to any of those, like bark in the parks, because they're too crazy. They're German shepherds, so I don't think. Yeah, the female, my dog Nova, would for sure run on the field. That's like a guarantee.
My pup, she's pretty good. She matches the energy. She like kind of reads the room and matches the energy a little bit. Now she's social as heck. I mean, every dog that she walked past, she wanted to say hey to. But it's she had a great time.
Well, good, man. I'm glad to hear it. Always good when the dogs are in a good mood. So, Jeff, there has shockingly been some discussions of things going on this week with the Reds where, although nothing is confirmed, we do have a couple potential transactions that are rumbling around there. And I know one of them you already talked about on Locked On this week, you and Steve, but I did have to make sure we got to it on this show. And we're going to start there. And that's with former Reds outfielder Jesse Winker being linked to potentially return to the Reds. Was it Gotham Baseball? I can't remember the gentleman's name. Actually reported that
Mark C. Healy. Yeah.
Mark C. Healy. Thank you. Reported that it basically was like a done deal, is like how he made it sound on his Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever you look at nowadays. And so that's where we're going to start the show today, Jeff, because I'm not sure I understand if this is really happening. And if it's really happening, why it's happening, in the sense that it's not that I dislike Jesse Winker. I think that Jesse Winker, obviously what he did here, that All-Star season in 21 was a blast and he was really fun to watch. And I'll always remember that home run against the Cardinals, to take care of a sweep in May when we thought that team was going to go to the playoffs. But we already have two Jesse Winkers right now, right? In Will Benson and Jake Fraley, two guys who can't really hit right-handed pitching, two guys whose numbers are eerily similar. I know Jesse Winker just was part of the Mets in the NLCS after a midseason trade and was really good with Washington the first half of the season. Had a really good stretch there, but wasn't necessarily great when he went to the Mets, although had a couple postseason moments. But I'm not sure I love this move. Where are your thoughts on the potential of this reunion?
No, I'm very much out on this. The only reason that I would be intrigued at all is if the price is so not prohibitive that like they're still in it for any of the other big outfielders. And to be quite frank, I don't think that he and Jake Fraley could exist on the same roster. He is the better bat. Jake Fraley's the better glove and the better base runner. But I think at the end of the day, one is here, the other isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one thing, and there is a degree to which I trust the Reds front office on a lot of different things. And you know, you may differ on how you trust the front office, but I think there's one thing about this front office that's almost inarguable. And that is that they keep things close to the chest. They do not leak anything that they don't want leaked. I think this is from an agent. This is from a rival exec. You know, those wonderful reports. Mark C. Healy, he kind of cites in other tweets that he has that he doesn't report what he hears from agents. He reports what he hears within front offices, but he does not specify that this came from the Reds. I think this came from other folks that are just like, they probably connected for a call, Nick Kroll and Jesse Winker. And sure, there's mutual interest in getting back together, but I don't think there was any sort of like, yeah, these are the figures, this is what they're talking about. Like that seems a little premature to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just think that realistically, like you said, you can't really kind of have Fraley and Winker on the same team. And like you said as well, I agree that if this is legit a thing, if this is actually going to happen, then someone has to be coming with him. There has to be another right-handed outfielder to join. And I was very open on your show with Steve a couple weeks ago that I would basically go pick up Lou Bob from O'Hare Airport and drive him to Cincinnati if I had to make him be a Red. Your group, your comment section for the episode I was on about the idea of Taylor Ward, and I actually really like that fit for the Reds as well. You've been very open about Brent Rooker having a lot there. So if Winker's coming one of those guys, okay, sure. But if Winker's coming one of those guys, do you need Winker?
Right. And to be honest with you, even in an area where like you go get Brent Rooker, there is a belief that he's not really an outfielder. He's more of a DH guy.
Yeah.
And we know from firsthand experience that if you can keep Jesse Winker out of the field, you're doing yourself a favor. So then we've also got Spencer Steer, and oh, by the way, there's Jamer Candelario, and there's CES. Like there are so many different guys that the Reds can rotate into that DH spot. And while that was something that David Bell did almost to a fault sometimes, I don't think Terry Francona is going to change that much.
Agreed.
There's no bona fide DH on this team, and that's just going to be an extra position for him to use. So to bring a guy in that is kind of remaindered to that, and it just he's not a guy that should be talked about this early. It feels like
right. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Juan Soto hasn't signed yet, but we're having conversations about Jesse Winker.
Yeah, he seems like a early February guy.
Invite the spring training potential.
Yeah. And then the guy also says, Mark C. Healy, the guy, I keep saying the guy, Mark C. Healy also says that the Mets are still very interested in a reunion. Fine. Take him. Win.
Yeah. By all means. With his
the memories are good. Don't need
with his 683 OPS and his 40 games with the Mets last year, 44 games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that I dislike him. It's just that since he left Cincinnati, he has not been a positive player overall, big picture. That year in Seattle, there were a lot of rumblings about not wanting him on the team anymore. Why he was moved to Milwaukee. That year in Milwaukee, he played 60 games. He was not very good. And like I said, he was really good in Washington.
What's your thoughts on this? Because I kind of came to this conclusion whenever the trade happened a couple of years ago, where we sent him to Seattle with Eugenio Suarez. I thought far and away Jesse Winker would be the guy that we missed, and it has been anything but that. Like I think it's Eugenio Suarez all day.
So, I was one of the few that didn't mind the trade. I'll start there. I thought I understood why they were doing it, and I didn't think Winker particularly would be able to reach the ceiling he had at that point. I thought that all-star year was as good as it was going to get. And so far I've been right. By a long shot, to put it nicely.
I mean, because last year was a bounce back year, right? And he still slugged 405. Like Jonathan India is like, yeah, dude, that's what I did.
Basically. Right. And I got traded for, but yeah, so I really didn't think that was good. I was going to look at a big picture and think they were going to miss either one of them. I was definitely wrong about Gino for sure. But yeah, now it's like kind of looking like especially with the questions at third base of Noelvi Marte and all these other guys. It's like maybe they should have held on to Gino because he's been okay. He hasn't really been very great, but he was decent in Arizona this year. It wasn't like he was terrible, but he wasn't awesome. But
if I could tell you, you'd have Gino or you have Jamer. Which one were you taking?
Ooh, probably Gino.
I think so. He's not positionally flexible like Candelario is playing first and third, but yeah, like I think I'd still take Gino over Jamer at this point. I think Jamer's got a little bounce back in him for 2025, but that's another podcast.
I hope you're right, man. I really do. Because I would like to see him have a good year next year. All right, so big picture, you and I are both out on this, and I think that's kind of the general consensus. Weird names. I say at this point, everyone's just talking, and you just see a bunch of stuff. Cardinals apparently are all in on the move on the rebuild. And don't worry, I didn't bring you on to talk about Paul Goldschmidt. But this Nolan Arenado thing, I'm not buying it by any stretch of the matter, but it's interesting.
I almost wonder if they're looking at their lineup because their farm system is intriguing. They have a lot of guys that are like Jordan Walker, that it's like,
yeah,
they got upside, but they also don't have a true fit with where they could be. Like, I don't necessarily know that I'm worried about the Cardinals in the next couple of years unless they do make some good moves.
Which they always seem to do.
Right. And Arenado, if they find the right move, could be that. I've seen a couple of rumblings that says, hey, the Reds should go get Nolan Arenado. And I say, no. Already got an aging third baseman on our team, and
Nolan Arenado away.
We don't need another one. Like, here's the thing. Everybody's going to say, well, he's a Gold Glove third baseman. He hasn't been that for a year, 2 years, really. And I think he was in the MVP conversation in 2023, maybe. I know it was in 2022. He was really far away from it last year. There's a big reason that the Cardinals fizzled late. And it's because both he and Goldschmidt just were okay. They weren't good. And so what are you trading for? You're trading for a big contract, number one.
Right.
You're trading for an old dude that's just going to block Noelvi Marte. You're going to, no, I'm not in on that either. It's funny because it feels like you mentioned, there's a lot of talk and a lot of rumblings, a lot of grumblings out there. This feels like the preview portion right before the winter meetings start. You know how like there's always that point in this, and I know Chad would know a lot more about this even than I do, but like there's always that point in the year where movies are being released. But quite frankly, we're all waiting for the big ones to come out here in a couple of months or something like that. And that's kind of what it feels like for baseball rumors. Like there's a bunch of rumors coming out right now, but the winter meetings are around the corner, my friend. Just wait.
Were you about to like cut like a Macho Man Randy Savage promo there? It was like your voice got lower. You kind of had this thing going.
Rolling with it.
Yeah, I liked it. No. I completely agree with you. And that kind of brings me to the next conversation about I think John Morosi today reported this. So this is kind of probably a little bit more promising. But the Cubs and Reds are the two of the intriguing prospects for Garrett Crochet from the White Sox, which I have been very open. I wanted to play from the White Sox. It wasn't necessarily him, but I would not hate it. I would be very open to it. The conversation obviously there, I just kind of goes out to who do you give up. And I've been very open that I don't care what prospects they give up. If they're going to win major league games, I don't care what the Chattanooga Lookouts record is. And so I'm looking at this as a situation where I love the Brady Singer trade. I thought, Indian Weimer was worth what you gave up to get him. And if you're just going to solidify your starting rotation by getting a guy who was really, really good, particularly the beginning of last year for a team that was not good at all, you feel good. That's a move you'd feel really good about because your rotation is already probably your strongest point of your team. That just solidifies at that point. You just seal it. And I'm not saying they're what the Dodgers are throwing out there. They're not the 1990s Atlanta Braves. But if you do go get a guy like him to put with Hunter and with Brady Singer and Rhett Lauder, which I assume is going to cost him either Lauder or Lodolo. If I had to pick one or the other, I'd probably go Lodolo.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not that I don't love Nick Lodolo, I do. But my point being that if they can go get someone who you can rely on basically every fifth day to take the ball and just solidify your strongest point of your team to where you can kind of get and focus on other spots, I'm open to it.
I do wonder a little bit about that. I've got reservations on this rumor. I don't think I'm out on it like I'm out on Jesse Winker or Nolan Arenado, but I got reservations about this. Garrett Crochet was not a starter before last year. And I know part of that was he dealt with Tommy John. He dealt with shoulder injuries for 2022 and 2023. So we didn't really see him. So maybe he would have been, but injuries said otherwise. But he did make every start last season. Before 2024, though, he had 73 career innings in, I believe it was 3 years, basically, of potential service time, counting the year that he missed because of all of the injuries. So there's a little bit of me that like I still kind of see him as a glass cannon. Now I've seen the other point that is if he has another year like last year, he will be untradeable. So if you're gonna get him, now's the time. And the lineup or the rotation that somebody like wrote out of Hunter Green, Garrett Crochet, Brady Singer, Nick Martinez, and then your fifth starter could be one of Andrew Abbott, Nick Lodolo, Rhett Lauder, Chase Burns, Chase Petty, Connor Phillips. Like,
pretty
I
sweet.
like that a lot. Like, your lineup doesn't have to be an all-star if that's your rotation. So I could kind of see it. My biggest reservation with all of this is this feels like a finishing move, right? And I know we just did talking about Macho Man.
That was nice.
Feel like wrestling, you know, something, whatever, Mortal Kombat. But this feels like a move that you make and you almost can't make another one. And maybe not from a money standpoint, but definitely from a trading standpoint. It's going to cost a lot in prospect capital. You're going to give up probably two of Edwin Arroyo, Cam Collier, Sal Stewart. They might want, like you said, a Rhett Lauder or a Nick Lodolo in that trade. So it's going to cost a lot on the prospect capital side. And it feels like the Reds are more apt to make trades than to sign free agents. And I would love Teoscar Hernandez to be walking through that door tomorrow. Would be a emergency podcast where I might just yell.
Yeah.
But
you and I doing first take, basically.
Yeah, like just you know, like I'm imagining. Do you remember the scene on The Office whenever whenever
I'm sure the answer is yes, but yes.
Yeah, whenever Dwight is sitting in the manager's seat and he calls Mose and he's like, "You'll never guess where I am." Like that's exactly Mose's reaction to that is my reaction to if the Reds were to get Teoscar Hernandez. But that my question would be, is that it? Is Garrett Crochet it? Because then I still have reservations about the offseason as well because you didn't address the outfield.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that for sure. That's why, like I said, if it was down to one or the other, I would go Lou Bob. That would be my White Sox move. More team control, 3 more years that they have control of him. They're not going to do anything in the next 3 years. Makes sense.
Probably the same prospect capital required to trade for him too.
Yeah, and you know that's definitely where your need's bigger. Again, not against it. If they make the move and they go get Garrett Crochet, then I'm very excited. But I have this inkling that Tito's going to go get one of his former starting pitchers in free agency to kind of solidify the remainder of the rotation. One that's got a couple Cy Young awards, and you're not going to put a lot of pressure on him next year because he'll be coming back from Tommy John surgery.
Trevor Bauer? No,
that is a he who must not be named.
I dropped that in there. Sorry.
That's he who must not be named. Jeff.
No, and no, I kid on that. Look, yes, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people that want to talk about him. My thought on this has been the entire league is blackballed him.
You and I have had this conversation so many times off air. It's just
we can talk about we can talk about all we want. There's 30 major league owners that have said no, and if 30 major league owners are going to say no, then there's nothing else to talk about. So anyway, that's on me for dropping that in the bucket.
No, I thought it was funny. It was funny.
Shane Bieber on this team would be amazing.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to cost him a whole lot because of the Tommy John. I don't know when he'll be able to pitch in the year. But I feel like that's something where Francona's, he's been pretty big on getting some of his guys from Cleveland on his staff, as far as his coaching staff goes. So I would be very excited about that move.
Could you imagine a scenario like last year, like, August hits and we lose our entire starting rotation, and thank God we had Nick Martinez because he held the ship together there for a while. This year, hopefully that doesn't happen, but this year maybe Hunter Green hits the IL for some sort of mechanical or maintenance thing, and maybe Brady Singer misses a start or two, and then all of a sudden, what's that? Is that Shane Bieber's music I hear? He's back and ready to go? And Chase Burns is maybe ready by that point. Like, there's so many options with this rotation that if you were to bring in a Bieber or a Crochet, that I think I'd almost be giddy about the rotation before spring training began. And considering where we were like a couple of weeks ago, where we're just like, oh my gosh, like there's no depth here. It feels really, really good.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very excited about Brady Singer. I'm really, really thrilled about it. What does that do for Graham Ashcraft's career? I don't know. But it seems like there's either going to be with the Reds in the bullpen or he's not going to be with the Reds. So it feels like those are kind of the two options for him at this point. Going around baseball, there's been a conversation that's been going around the last couple of days, and I'm really excited to get your thoughts on this about a new rule called the Golden Bat. And then, Jeff, if I have any of this wrong, please correct me. But it seems like the general consensus I'm getting to this is you can pick any guy on your team to bat at any point in the game for one at bat, and it does not affect your lineup. And so I'm looking at this, and the person like you and I who look at baseball as like a religious experience, like that, like GABP is our place of worship. Probably at first kind of go, oh, that sounds dumb. And then I saw what Michael Kay said. And what Michael Kay said, for the Yankees longtime broadcaster, really rang a bell to me, and it made a lot of sense. Now, I'm not saying I'm for it, but what he more or less said is, we're not trying to get guys like you and me to watch baseball at this point. We're trying to get the younger audience. They're trying to get those guys to love the game the way you guys do. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but more or less what he's saying is, we're trying to bring in a new audience, and we're trying to add excitement to baseball. And so I still stand by, I'm not sure I'm in love with it. And it does sound really silly when you kind of break it down. But I also think about, say you have this rule, it's 4-4 in the bottom of the ninth, and Matt McLean's on second, and Ellie, and you're like, all right, cool, we can use Ellie for this at bat right here. And it's some right-handed guy who just throws gas, and you have Ellie De La Cruz walking up to the plate to kind of solve it. That sounds kind of fun, but it's, I think, more, okay, the situational of it is what I'm curious. Like, are you going to use this guy in the sixth inning where you're like, oh, we're down 3-0 and we have a chance to get a grand slam here because the bases are loaded. Let's bring in this guy. So the strategy behind it is kind of interesting. The Michael K point of it, I understand. I just still don't know if I'm in love with it.
No, and it's certainly a rough idea right now, because what you mentioned is even just a part of the proposal, because they've said, well, it could be that, or we could limit it to seventh inning or later, or we could limit it to the team who's trailing is the team that can use this, things like that. Like they're still kicking about what this rule might actually look like, but the gist of it is, yeah, pick your favorite hitter on your team and you get to use him in whatever situation you can fathom. I don't love this because, and Michael K, his point notwithstanding, I love the stories about the guys who come through, and I get it that there's like not a high percentage chance of that. Like, the Luke Maleys of the world really aren't going to come through with that clutch at bat,
Right,
like a Tyler Stevenson would. But it's those things that we remember a lot. Like, I mean, we still remember Billy Bates from 1990. Like, would he have even been in this kind of a rule?
that's a good point. Yeah.
Is there, and Steve used the example because we talked about this the other day on our show. Steve used the example of Francisco Cabrera and the Braves and the Pirates in that playoff game where Sid Bream comes around and scores. Francisco Cabrera was the guy that got the hit. And for anybody out there, you should probably need to go look up who Francisco Cabrera is, because I had to. I'm not gonna lie on that one, but it's things like that that I think make baseball great. And the idea that a team has an ability to call upon their best hitter in a situation where that might be the most important situation of the game and they can just change the batting lineup for one guy, I don't think that draws in the non-baseball believer, right? Like, we're true believers, like you said. I think the baseball casual, the baseball non-believer, they're not really worried about in-game situations. If it's a career milestone thing, like when Aaron Judge was chasing the home run record, people watched those at bats because he was chasing something big. It wasn't because, the Yankees are tied and they got the bases loaded in the bottom of the 8th inning with 2 outs, and now Aaron Judge is coming to the plate. Like, people aren't like, let me stop what I'm doing to watch that. That seems like they're creating a problem that doesn't exist. And I feel like this doesn't fix anything. I don't know that this is even a problem that could exist. This is and I said this on on our show when we discussed it. They're like turning baseball into an arcade game.
Yeah.
Kind of messing with it too much. If this rule gets past there's a lot of buzz around, the New York office about like buzz. Come on, you talk about the most vague word ever that Rob Manfred used. There's a lot of buzz. Yeah, most of the buzz
as early as next
this
year.
Is dumb.
Yeah.
I'm not in on it. I think I love the way baseball is that you could come up with a clutch, a really tense situation, and you get your number 8 hitter up, and you just got to have a good team.
Got to roll with it. Yeah.
You shouldn't be allowed to be bailed out if you've got your defense first center fielder up with the bases loaded in the bottom of the 9th. Like, I'm not bailing you out there. Like, that guy's got to get a hit. He's a pro for a reason, right?
Yeah. I think the other thing I think about, and I'm genuinely curious, and this is obviously, like you said, we don't know really anything about this. Is there a possibility a guy can get back-to-back at-bats in that case? Like, can Ellie strike out? And then you're like, no, keep him in the box. This is their golden at-bat. Is that a thing? What if opposite? What if Ellie doubles? Do you have to bring a pinch runner in? And you're like, he's gonna bat again?
Right. So, like, I'm guessing in this weird rule, if the guy's on base, you can't call on him to bat, which then limits you if you've only got 1 star.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a little bit intriguing with it, but I still think, like, in the case that you had, like, he just struck out, do you want him batting again?
Right.
Like, that's the other point of this too, is the human side of it, which I think most guys would be like, yeah, sure, I'll go up and I'll hit. But is this something where there's strategy that would definitely come into it? But I just come back to, I think it's silly. I think it's, I'm trying to think of a rule that they proposed a couple of years ago. I felt like there was a rule they proposed a couple of years ago that was a little bit silly that I was not into. I don't know. Like, I know one of our favorite people here in town, and I've talked to him before about rule changes. Dan Horde is just about for any rule change they can come up with. He's like, I love baseball, but I also love entertainment. And if it's going to make it more entertaining, I want to see that. But I don't know that I want to see this.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Don't hate it, just not anywhere near in love with it.
Yeah.
Get it, understand the reasoning, not for me. That's the way I put it. So perfect. All right, so I got a couple fan mails here. Then we will get out of here and go sleep because it is much later in the evening than I had anticipated. Somehow my kid has stayed asleep all night, so that's been nice. Yeah. So I first want to make sure I get this out there. So, of course, if you are a member of our Patreon at patreon.com/FrontCincy, these questions come from you, the people who make this show very possible. And I am going to start this a little different, Jeff, because our good pal on the Patreon, Andrew Williams, sent out in all caps. It sounded like more of a panic than a question. I need some Reds names for my son. And what he's telling us, he announced in our Patreon Slack a couple of days ago that him and his wife are expecting their first child. So congratulations. That is fantastic news. And he wants us to think of ways that we can name players after, name his child after Reds players. And there's some fun ones in here. So his last name's Williams. So there's Joey J. Williams is one that Seth Shaner came up with. Crosley Williams. I like that. So I'm trying to think of a fun one that would just be totally off the radar that kind of rule. I mean, I can't go Kenneth George Kenneth Griffey Williams. I don't think that works very well.
But Ed Roush Williams.
Ed Roush Williams. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Hoyt Wilhelm Williams. Hoyt Wilhelm. Yeah.
Joseph Morgan Williams. That's like
Joseph Morgan.
Nope. You got Joey Votto. You got Joe Morgan. I mean, you got it all there. Could Deion Sanders Williams work?
Reggie Sanders Williams.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think of like, it seems like 2 last names back to back could be a little bit interesting. Like Paul Derringer Williams.
Yeah.
Actually, I like that one a lot.
I do too.
Paul Derringer Williams.
Yeah.
Bucky Walters Williams too. Like the 1-2 punch in the 40s, Bucky Walters Williams or Paul Derringer Williams. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. So there's some fun ones there. And then we have this fun one here from good friend Skylar Webker. Take the front office and owners out of the question. Build me this season's roster through realistic trades. What does that look like?
The realistic trades.
Yeah.
I think that like Garrett Crochet, I talked with our man Todd Welter over at Locked On White Sox, and he was even talking about the White Sox aren't necessarily prioritizing people who are close to the majors. Like they're okay with further down the list. I think you can get by with one of Sal Stewart or Cam Collier in this deal. You could also then maybe both of them.
Yeah.
I think I'm okay with that. Sal Stewart, Cam Collier, Nick Lodolo for Garrett Crochet. I like what you mentioned about Nick Lodolo. I'm Nick Lodolo. I don't want to sound like I'm a hater, but I'm a little worried about.
I am too.
The blister thing, like right, it just feels like he's changing too much to avoid something that it's happened a couple of times, but it's not happened like all the time. It derailed last year for him because into June he was arguably the Reds, like it was him and Hunter Green were neck and neck, and then June happened and he just disappeared. So I'm a little bit concerned about him. So if that's the deal, I think I would do that. And then could you turn around? See, trading for an outfielder is hard because I think teams are more apt to trade pitching than they are to trade position players. The idea that the Reds want to be a pitching, farm system, a pitching first organization when it comes to drafting and developing, that's not a very unique idea. There's a lot of other organizations that do that.
Yeah.
To, varying degrees of success, of course, but that's what they fancy themselves. So when they find themselves a good position player, like Oakland has sworn up and down that they're not going to trade Brent Rooker no matter what. But I think everybody's got a price. So, could you sway him away? I feel like that would take another, that might take like one of Chase Burns or Chase Petty. And then you start to wonder, do you trade that guy then? Because they're ready.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see them at some point this year.
I do too.
So trades are hard for me. I'd much rather do the free agent pool, which I don't know. The most recent Q&A with Mark Sheldon that Nick Krall did, Nick Krall was saying, yeah, we're going to the winter meetings and we got flexibility. And when he says they got flexibility, that means he's cooking. Right. So we'll have to see what he serves up.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, the last question from our good friend north of the border, Joey Gaditza. I've gotten caught up in the latest Reds rumors, but the Reds still don't have a backup catcher. The unsexiest move of all. At this point, is Maley returning likely? I just feel like it's too early to determine that, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at this point, we're talking about like Yasmani Grant. I think it's Yasmani Grandal and Elias Diaz are the only two remaining guys off the list that I kind of wrote down in my mind whenever the offseason first started, because so many guys are gone. And I don't even know that Kyle Higashioka was even on my list, but he's already gone. And for some reason, while everybody's waiting, while the entire outfield market, which is flush with different, talented players, while they're all waiting on Juan Soto, all of the catchers are signing. Like, I think Danny Jansen's still available, but he's going to want to start wherever he goes. The Reds aren't getting him. But I mean, Jacob Stallings went back to Colorado. Higashioka, like I mentioned, there's two other guys, and I'm blanking on their names, but it just seems like with each passing day, Luke Mailey's going to be back here on opening day.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. But yeah, I think that about wraps up everything here. Jeff, I definitely appreciate your time tonight, man. It was really fun to hang out with you and talk Reds baseball as always. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, this week's edition of the Riverfront. Thank you all so much, as always, for hanging out. We'll see you all next week.